All right, so let's start our part three, which is we're going to animate. So we're still on the same file right here from from part two. We want to animate this box to bounce up and down on a loop, and then we're going to fix all the issues, but we're just going to be using transform tools. So this is a simple way to animate, but not very efficient. Okay, because we will be using all the transform tools. It's part of your training to get familiar with the tools. So the first thing we need to do here is make sure you go all the way to frame one, okay? And then select all the keys like so. And then press X, delete keyframes. Okay, that way there's no animation on this. Okay, then we can put it back to 0 on the X. So it's back at the center. Okay, and 111 on all this. So right now I need you to file, save as. Let's call this one box bounds because we called the other one box bounds. Well, I don't know why I did that. Should be just box lesson. Okay, that's what we're going to call it. So that you get a new file and you get to save your previous animation. Okay, so always do that. Or if you want it simpler, if this is the box bound series anyway, you go to file, save as, and you can click this plus button right here. This will append the name. So it's kind of like if I click plus, you see it? It says lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3, so on and so forth. I'm just going to cancel that because I already did the first one. But that's one way you can easily rename files, especially you need to be saving in incremental what do you call stages so that you don't files gets corrupted, you have backup. Okay, another thing that's important right here while we're saving, if we go to edit preferences, and if you go here where it says save and load, you want to make sure that you have autosave on. The interval is about 2 minutes that it will, you have power loss. Your cat press your power button, which they always do on mine. Your dog step on the power cable. Plenty of things that can go wrong, or Blender crashes. Okay, it barely crashed, but it does. Okay, so make sure that you have autosave on. Okay, and yeah, that will save you a lot of grief later on when that happens. Okay. Um, Another thing is that when we start saving any Blender files that has any textures or photos and whatnot, you also want to go to File, External Data. Make sure your automatically packed resources is checked. Okay. That way, when we have sound or any media, video and photo images, okay, everything is packed into that Blender file. All right. So I'll remind you again later when we export this bounce. Okay. So this will be a kind of like you're dribbling the cube. Okay. You're dribbling the cube and you want to make sure that it's, what do you call this? It's just kind of looping. Okay. So the energy doesn't dissipate. So the bounce will always go up and down, just so that it looks nice when we're looping it. Okay. And we're going to do this in 24 frames. Okay. 24 frame loop. So I'm going to change my timeline now to 24. Okay. If I hit tilde, okay, it's the key below escape. You can click on frame all. It will automatically expand it for you. You can still, even expand it a little bit more right here. So I get maximum on my timeline right here by scrolling your mouse. Okay, so we're going to follow all the stuff and whatnot, but this is a bouncing cube, okay, box, and we're going to add a squash. So for the squash, since we are just squashing it manually, we're going to, in a way, do eyeballing stuff, okay? So when we squash it, let's say we squash it like so. Let's say we squash it at 0.7, okay, on the height. Then we want to expand it 1.3 on the X, 1.3 on the Y. So it kind of gave it the volume is displaced. Okay. So, all right. So what possible issues we're going to have with that? We're just going to scale it like that. See the pivot point? Okay. The pivot point or origin in any 3D program, it's basically the point of rotation, right? So all the animation happens on that point. So if we were scaling this and we wanted to be on the ground, it will not scale on the ground. It will not squash, right? It'll squash in the middle. Okay, so there you go. That's a lot of counter animation that you need to do to position this cube just so that it's on the ground. Okay, so first things first is, since we are not rigging this, we're just using transform tool. I'm going to click a bunch of undos here. So it goes back to 111. We want to put that rotation or the point of animation, okay, where the impact's going to be. So that's the bottom of this cube. So I'm going to do forward slash here. Okay, forward slash makes everything go away except for the object that you have selected. When you click forward slash again, everything is back. Okay. The beauty of this is that we can concentrate on just this cube and then position that pivot point to this one. So how do we change the pivot point to a specific parts of the object or in space? Actually, we can set the origin or pivot point where the 3D cursor is, which is perfectly located right now. You see it? Since we moved this cube one unit up, remember that one from the previous video? Z up right here. So we can now just tell Blender object set origin to where the 3D cursor is, and voila, it jumped right here. Okay. So what if your 3D cursor is not there? Well, there's ways to change that also. So let's do this now. Let's go to edit mode. Okay. Go to week 1 video. If you don't understand what edit and object mode is, don't skip any lesson, because if you do, you can't participate in any of the homework because you are expected to have learned all the previous lessons. It's a build-up of skill all the way to the end of the semester. So I'm going to go to my face selection here, which is keyboard shortcut 3 if you're not emulating numpad. And let's say if I selected this face right here. So which one is this? Well, let me see. Tilde front. Okay, so it's a right side selection. Okay, so I can tell Blender to make the cursor to jump on this face right here in the center. So I can go, let's say here, face, where's that? Snap, okay. Mesh, sorry, snap. And I can tell it to cursor to selected. Basically 3D cursor to selected, okay. When I do that, so you can see the 3D cursor jump on this one, center of that selection. And guess what? Just like before, if I go to object mode, I can just tell it, set origin to that 3D cursor, and there it is. So that's how we do that, okay? So here, select the bottom. I'm going to go to Mesh, Snap, Cursor to Selected. Hit Tab to go to object mode. Blender, tell Blender to set the origin to the 3D cursor. Okay, if you want the pivot point origin back at the center of this one, let's say, of course, you can click on do now and that now will happen. But let's say you want to do that after so many operations and you no longer can undo. You can go set origin to geometry and it just finds the center of the object. I mean, this is a cube, so it's perfectly in the center and it'll do that. Okay, so that's how you do it over there. So I'm going to click undo, make it go back here, and then press forward slash to bring all the other elements. Okay, and now I can do squash along the z-axis. You can see. All right, so the pivot point's at the bottom. We no longer need to worry about this one kind of raising up and not being on the ground. So now it's ready for animation. Okay, I'm going to press numpad 1 or tilde front. Okay, so that this one is perfectly kind of flat right here. We can just work on this one. So this is going to be exclusive to the move tool and then the scale tool. How come we can't add rotation to this? Well, we can, except it's going to be weird because as you can see here, the pivot point's at the bottom. So when this thing is bouncing, and we want it to rotate, it's not going to have that at its center. It's going to need a parent or a helper or an empty null to do that. So that's for the next lesson. Okay. So this one is just strictly just transform tools, and you're going to realize what the limitation is on this one. But for fast, simple animation like this, and it's great for learning because you get to see how it's done manually. All right. So the 4 steps: select the object you want to animate. All right, there it is. So we want to animate the cube. Select step 2. We want to position the time. So we want this thing to be the beginning of the animation, the timeline right there. Third is that position your object or transform the object. Okay, so we want this one on the z-axis. We want it up like so. So how much? Maybe 5 on the z-axis. Okay, we want it to drop it and then basically squash and then bounce up again. So 5 right there. So that's the beginning. So I'm going to right click this, insert single keyframe. And that's it. It's not going to go anywhere. It's just at the top. Okay. All right. So now we want to bounce this one. So if we're just kind of bouncing this up and down, it's pretty easy, right? So I can go select this object, step 1, step 2. Okay. Frame 12 in the middle right there. Okay. And then we can go back to the floor. I eyeballed that. That's not correct, but we know the value here. It's set to 0. Okay. So it's set to 0. Remember, we moved the pivot point. That's why we lost the 1 unit right there. Right click it, insert single keyframe. So as you can see now, without the squash, we're just going to be bouncing this. There you go. And it doesn't look good. It looks like something is stopping it from dropping. Okay. And right here, we can go to frame 24. We want it back up here. So that's easy enough. We can just type in 5 right here and then insert single keyframe. We could do that. Or we can select the first keyframe, which is the same value as 5 right there. Shift D is to duplicate. Okay. If I go Shift D right here, copy that one and drag it all the way to 24, guess what? That would be the same thing as if we went in there and dragged that. So now you're learning that the timeline or the dope sheet or the graph editor later on, that you will be able to just copy keys. You don't have to perform all the 4 steps if you understand where those things needs to be. All right, so let's take a look at this one. All right, something is wrong with the bounds. Okay, so if you take a look at how this should be working, is that when it drops, it should drop slowly. So it has that, okay, but not, it's dropping way too fast, right? So because we're just kind of cycling it, right? So it should be slow here, and before it reaches 12, it should be fast, because terminal velocity on like I don't know, 3 feet of height. Okay, it's gonna, the weight, the gravity is gonna pull it down so a lot faster. Plus, if we bounce this thing on its takeoff, it can't be this slow. Look how slow that is. It should bounce quick, really fast. Okay, and then slow down here again, and it repeats the process, of course. Okay, so that's what we call timing and spacing in principles of animation. So our timing would be 1, 12, and 24, and the spacing would be, how much of the how we change the speed of the animation. So in traditional 2D drawing, right, or animation, I'm going to annotate it real quick right here. So if you want it to kind of stay where it's at slowly, you bunch up your keys, right? And then you give a lot of space right here so that it goes faster. So this one is slow, and the moment we start skipping this one's going to be fast right there. So let's click and do. Okay, so but first things first, before we do any of that, let's fix our squashing now. Okay, so what is our timing on the bounce? It's 1 frame, so there's no chance for you to do any squashing when you're you're only on the ground for one frame because frame 13 is already going up. So that can't do. We got to provide time for it to do the squashing while on the ground. So 12 right here, we're going to press G. We're not going to duplicate it. We're just going to move it. G to 10. So we want it now to be on the ground at 10 instead of 12, and then stay on the ground from 10 to 14. So this is where we need to copy this. When you copy frames like this, always deselect first and then select again in case you have any keys on the timeline that you're not even seeing. Let's say, sometimes they're hidden like that. So you got to be careful. Deselect first and select the one you want to copy. Shift D to copy. Drag that all the way to 14. As you can see now, let's see our bounce. It's still wrong, but at least it's staying on the ground and we'll be able to animate our squashing. Okay. So now here we can change our function curve to correct the bounce, and then we'll add the squashing later. Okay. So let me go to front again. Okay. And let's take a look at our function curve. All right. So right now we're on layout. I'm going to switch this now to the animation tab. All right, we're in the animation tab. All these tabs right here, these are pre-made user interface, custom user interface. You don't need to press animation there. I could easily make this into that, but it just makes it faster. With animation is that we get what the camera is looking at. You do have a camera in there. I left it. There it is. Okay. And right here will be our working window, kind of like that window before. Let's also give it the render preview right there. Okay. And then here, it now switched from the timeline to the dope sheet. So dope sheet usually are vertical in animation, but this is digital animation where we have it horizontal. So same thing as before. If I position my cursor right here, tilde, frame all, okay, then I can scroll my mouse a little bit. So there's our animation right there, okay. To kind of simplify this, we can just hide everything just on the summary. So we're only dealing with one keyframe for now, okay. But I guess we can show that because we're going to have the z-axis later on, and you start. So when you're working on just the z location, this is that layer, and then when we move those key G, as you can see, everything moves because that's the one that's actually keyed right there. Okay, but what we want to see right now, if you want to increase your timeline also, you can position your cursor to that horizontal bar right there, and you can just drag it like so. This one is just showing what's on the camera. So if I play this, we get our playback. There you go. So this is what's going to be recorded. Okay, so let's fix this. So we can't fix that in the dope sheet without doing step animation, where we actually manually add animations going every frame like so, kind of like your stop motion animation. Okay, remember we talked about before that there is a default animation interpolation here, a behavior. So you can change this behavior to constant if you want it like that. You see it where it looks like it's a step. So you don't see any in between. So when that's thing on Bezier, you are the master or senior animator, and then your junior animator is Blender, and it's giving you all the in-betweening for you. Remember, we only animated 1, 10, 14, and 24, but it has in-betweens here, okay? So these are the behavior from that Bezier. So let's take a look at it, okay? I'm going to click on Dope Sheet right here, and then actually here on General, and then switch to Graph Editor. All right, here's our graph editor right here, okay? I'm going to press A to select all the keys, okay? How many keys do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4. Remember, 1, 10, 14, and 24. Let's make sure we could see it all. Okay, so here's that behavior where it's slowing down, right? So this is a Bezier. It's a smooth curve, all right? So I'm going to press tilde right here and frame all, so it's more obvious, okay? So take a look at the cube right here. So it slowly goes down, but when it hits, before it hits, it also slows down here. You see it? So that's the wrong behavior, because the problem with that is it looks like it's like hovering, not bouncing, okay? So from 1 to maybe around 7, it looks correct, okay? And then 7 to 10, it needs to be fast. And then what's happening between 10 and 14? Nothing. We want it to stay in there because the squashing is going to happen from 10 to 14. And we have a flat line right here, which is good. If you have any bumps here or anything, then that means you're going to have some wobble on that animation. So think of the function curve as the principles of animation with the arc. Whatever those arc are represents, the arcs or the line function represent what's kind of wobbly or smooth animation you're going to have. Okay. And then we're on 14, 15. Look what's happening. It's also sloping as a slow interpolation. So this is going to bounce up. So it has to be quick. So on 15, it can't be there. It has to be around here already. Okay. So we got to change 10 and 14. We don't have to do anything with 1 and 24. Not unless we want it to slow down at the top, which we will. Okay. So for now, we want 10 and 14. What are those other handles right there? That's the Bezier handle. If I press G here to move, so you see that seesaw. So the key is this one, and those two are handles. Okay, so there's always handles, two of them, and they're linked right now, so that's why it's doing that. So first thing we need to do is unlink those handles so that we can change the curvature to go like this so it goes fast, right? So select the two. Okay, you can press V as in victory. Change those to vector. Once you change that to vector, the behavior is different already. Okay, it cut it right here, so it's independent now. Okay, don't mess with those because you want to keep that flat. Okay, so as you can see now, the behavior kind of changed and it has a fast movement now, but not really fast. But let's watch it. See if it's actually all right. Looks like it's kind of bouncing. A lot better than the previous one, but it could still, we could still edit that to make it bounce better. Okay, so I'm going to stop right here. Okay, so I'm going to grab this handle right here. I'm going to push it to the right until it's a straight line. So you can see right here, that's going to be a fast movement, a lot faster. I'm not going to mess with 14 yet, so you can see the difference. Okay, so it's dropping now a lot faster, but it's not going up as fast. So let's fix this also. Drag that here. Let's play. All right. Okay, looks like we have a bounce now going up and down. Okay. All right, so what else can we do? Maybe we can slow down the drop also. So I'm going to press G and then X so that it's locked in. So I'm going to drag this kind of like so. So even slow it down some more. Okay, and this one as well. G, grab X-axis. Okay, from our previous lesson. Okay, let's take a look. All right, so it has a little bit of a hang time. So we kind of gave it a little bit of personality. All right, so that fixes the move or location animation for the bounce. Now let's add some squashing. Okay. So let's stop this one. Let's switch now to the dope sheet so that, we could do it here. We don't need to switch there, but I want you to get used to the switching right here and get used to the timeline tools. I'm going to go click to the dope sheet, something where you're very familiar with. Okay. So with the object still selected, we're going to go to frame 10. This is when the squashing starts. Why here? Well, because this is when the cube or the box hits the ground, right? This is the beginning of the squashing. So no squashing on 10, and then on 12, that's where you're going to squash it. And then 14, we're going to unsquash it. Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, so on 10 is the beginning of the squash. So this is like the rotation before from the previous animation. Okay, I'm going to press N for my sidebar right here. Okay, so what we want is animated squashing. But since there's no squashing on 10, that's just the beginning. It's going to squash on 12, unsquash on 14. We have to key all this 3 right here. So we can now press I and then location. It gives us keyframe for all those 3. We could right click each one of them, insert single keyframe, insert single keyframe. That would also work, but that's just a lot of, it's a lot of time where we, we could make it faster by just pressing keyboard shortcut I and then doing scale. All right, so now we're looking at eliminating all this counter animation that would normally be your safe place when you animate. We got to start learning how to be more efficient. So 10, no scaling yet. Then we go to 12. This is when it's going to scale. Okay. So how much scaling? So let's go on Z. It's going to squash it. Let's say 0.5. 0.5. So that's a really exaggerated one. All right. So what happens is that for solid drawing principles of animation, we got to displace X and Y. Whatever we lost on the height, it needs to spread. Okay. So X, this is not scientific, folks. We're just adding the number here. So on X, we're going to do 1.5. And then Y, 1.5. Okay. So here, 0.5. So that's basically what it is. Okay. So we're on frame 12. Those are our values right there. Press I and scale. And voila, there's that. Okay. And then we have XYZ right here. Remember, on scale only, right? Those three, right? Just want to make sure you see those. All we have to do now, I mean, we can go here. I mean, it's not a big deal. 14, type in all one and then I scale, right? We know how to do that. We can also want to practice you guys into selecting the keys. Don't select Z, okay? Only XYZ scale, Shift D and drag it to 14. So now 10, 12, back to 14 and up. So now we can press the space bar on this one. And there's our bouncing cube. And there's no rotation. You know why? Because, yeah, we didn't have any uh, pivot point in the center. So we can't rotate this one with just the setup. But we're now seeing the beginnings of animation basics, and hopefully you start understanding what's going on in this one. So this will be part of your homework. So what's going to happen here is that we're going to export this. Okay. We're going to create a QuickTime file for this that you're going to submit. Okay. So how do we first make sure you save this? Okay. We're going to save it right here. All right. So this is the ball bounce lesson. Okay. So we're going to be using QuickTime for our render for the class simply because we're using Teams, and Microsoft Teams previews QuickTime really well. Okay. Don't export in MKV because you'll get 0. Okay. So follow along. All right. So first thing is let's go to the first tab right here, which is a render. We're using EV right now, which is our real-time render. Don't worry about it. Okay. We're going to turn on ambient occlusion right here just so that we get some, we're not even going to see it because we're, probably some shadowing on. We're just going to turn that on. We don't have anything reflective. Well, maybe you want to go fancy here. No, it's ambient occlusion. Next, the default resolution is just HD, 1920 by 1080. So if you want to export this in 4K, you simply input the 4K resolution there, or you put a ×2 here. Okay, so 3840 by 2160. That will give you 4K output. But for now, we're just going to leave everything as default. Percentage 100 because you want the full HD to be rendered. Okay, don't mess with aspect ratio. Frame rate's 24. Start and end is 24 because we're just going to watch this kind of loop, repeatedly. Okay. And what's important now is here where it says output. Okay. So first is we want to make sure this will be saved somewhere. So you can use your OneDrive or just on the desktop, then transfer it to OneDrive so you can easily find it first on the desktop. So let's do that. I'm going to click the browse icon right here. Okay. I'm going to click on my desktop. Okay. It's going to give it a name. So put your name in here. Okay. So first name underscore last name. Okay. And then call this one transform animation. Transform animation, so that we are animating this just using transform tools. Okay. Click accept. And as you can see here, it's on OneDrive. No, I don't want it on OneDrive. I guess I can go to OneDrive. Okay, so that's my OneDrive right there. I want to make sure that that's where, okay. So I'm going to click accept. All right. So now we have an output. Okay. So that's where it's going to save it. And what we want here for file format is to change it from still image to MPEG video. So click this, MPEG video. Okay. And we want encoding. This is what gives you MKV. So you get 0 if you use this container. So switch it to QuickTime. Okay. Leave everything alone. It's just for practice. So we don't want high quality or whatnot. We just want to see your animation bounce up and down correctly. Okay. And you're going to submit your Blender file in the QuickTime. So once you've done this setup right here, make sure your container's on QuickTime. Make sure your file format is on MPEG. Video codec, we can just leave that in there. No need to change that. Okay. So we go to render, render animation, and it's done. Okay. So if I go to my desktop and find that animation, where did it go? Dallas College. No, it's on my OneDrive. Is that where I put it? Oh yeah, it's right here. Okay, so I'm going to double click it and then bring it down here. There it is. All right, let me see. How do we loop in media player? Loop, loop. Okay, there we go. So that's what we're expecting to see. Okay, so the next lesson is exactly the same, except we're going to be using a rig or a parent. So we can make this cube spin while it's in midair. Okay, so this is animating a bounce animation using just transform tools. All right, so I'll see you guys on the next lesson.